Sure.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. It's great to see 2022, and hopefully some new horizons and opportunities opening up for all of us in the near future. So my name is Apolonio Morales. I'm the Director of External Affairs. I go by Polo for short, like Ralph Lauren, or if you're into water sports, that's how you pronounce it and that's how you spell it. And I've been with CHIRLA for about 8 years. I'm the son of immigrants. I came here to the United States in the early 70s. I was product of the public education system, went off, worked hard and did everything my mom told me to do to get ahead. And so I was able to do that and, do the work that I do today. So I have a very clear understanding what it's like to have an immigrant family and to have folks struggle with being undocumented and then eventually being able to adjust their status and become citizens. So in that spirit, the work that we continue to do here at CHIRLA is really based on this notion that we are trying to build an inclusive society that is welcoming of immigrants. And I think if this pandemic has taught us anything, is that we are reliant on one another in order for us to get basic necessities, to be able to get the care that we need, to be able to make sure that we are successful, thriving, and healthy. And so, for CHIRLA, we've been at this work for about 35 years. I think we're entering into 36 years of this work. We started off small nonprofit organization doing direct services. And then eventually we started, doing community organizing. We established spaces across LA. And then over the course of many years, we have a civic engagement department. So we get out the vote every election, every primary, every midterm, every presidential election. And then we keep engaged with the voters. So we've file that we've been building over the course of the last 10 years or so. And so, we look at civic engagement and working with the community. I'm going to throw some facts out to you that you should know. 50% of the state of California is either an immigrant or the son or daughter of an immigrant. And so any issue that you touch upon at the state level, whether that's climate change, education, healthcare, it's an immigrant issue. And so if you are talking about eradicating poverty, or you're talking about addressing any particular need, housing, homelessness, all these are issues that touch upon the immigrant community. And so here in Los Angeles County, there is a 1/3 of the county is immigrant as well. And so if we look at the numbers of folks that have temporary protective status, or they're undocumented, or they have lawful permanent residency, they're not quite citizens yet, there's a whole bunch of folks living here in LA County that support our infrastructure, pay taxes into a system that they don't directly benefit from. And so, this is kind of where we're coming from when we advocate and we push for change at the state level, at the local level, and at the federal level. So that's a little bit about CHIRLA. We have a lot of social media presence. So if you ever want to follow us after my presentation, I can give some links that you can follow, Facebook, Instagram, that kind of stuff. And so I want to go back a little bit in time to 2020 in the elections and then where we're at today. And so just a little bit about the campaign promise that was made about getting a path to citizenship for the undocumented here in the US. So President Biden set out and said, we are going to move forward a path to legalization, a comprehensive immigration reform package in order to address immigration issues once and for all. And so once that announcement was made, the election took place in November. He won. And so immediately we started engaging the Biden administration during the transition to be able to make sure that they kept this issue at the forefront. And so we didn't want to, fall behind or wait for other issues to move forward. We said, we're going to go ahead and start engaging immediately. And so what that entailed is providing some policy recommendations, policy changes. This is what you can do administratively. This is what Congress can do. This is what you can help support in order to maximize the number of people that can be that can become citizens. So all that was suggestions that CHIRLA and other national organizations were able to present to the Biden administration. So on day one, President Biden put out this immigration reform idea that he was going to push for it. And then a couple of weeks later, we actually saw the text of that. And so what we saw in there was a lot of our recommendations were included in that comprehensive immigration reform package, which was a surprise to us, with a primary focus on legalization and path to citizenship. And so this was a different take, right? A different administration, not solely focused on enforcement, deportations, and all that other stuff, or things happening, at the border. It was addressing the folks that are already here. That was highlighted. There were other changes to the southern border and the way that immigrants are treated, and when they come to us at southern border, and opportunities and programs that could be created to help facilitate this instead of going through this thousands of miles trajectory to come to the U.S. and then in order just to be stopped at the southern border. So what we saw was a huge opportunity. And so we began organizing right before January. Actually, we had started organizing actions here in California, started organizing our partners across the state to be able to start getting sign-on letters, to start mobilizing marches, and start doing the thing that we do in order for us to get some traction on this. So by the time we saw what the Biden administration was proposing, we said, this is great. This is on the right path. The only thing that's stopping us is the Senate, it seems like. And so that 50-50 split was a big question mark up in the air. And so as time moved forward, it became clear that some of these senators on the Democratic side were going to be much more difficult, and they were not going to be playing ball unless they were appeased in some way, shape, or form. And even that is up for debate at this point in time. So we decided we're going to look at different opportunities, and some of those opportunities was through the budget reconciliation. And so we explored the idea of including immigrants through the budget reconciliation. It's a must-pass bill. It needs a simple majority. If you don't pass it, the federal government shuts down. So, we felt that it's important to include immigrants in there because if it is impacting the economy, it is impacting the budget of the United States. It is affecting, the basic functions and funding of our government. And so, at first, it looks like that idea didn't quite get any traction. However, there was this bill that was floated around called, Build Back Better, or some opportunities to be able to get a simple majority, to get, certain pieces of legislation through. And so when that Build Back Better plan, and this was through the course of many, many months, right, to the point to where we're at right now, last year, before the end of the year, we were really pushing for the inclusion of a path to citizenship through that budget reconciliation process. The Senate parliamentarian, which is like basically a referee, who's not an elected official, gets to say through what's called a bird bath, what qualifies to be included in a budget reconciliation type of vote, or a simple majority vote. In this case, Build Back Better. The analysis at first was you can include legislation that is path to citizenship for dreamers and for farm workers and for essential workers. And so that idea was plan A. Plan B was, okay, you can actually change the immigration system without having to overhaul or provide a massive bill or law change simply by changing the registry date. And so the registry date is a statute of limitations. Basically what it says is federal government recognizes that you have been here for decades, and you've been contributing and you're almost put to retiring at this point. We're going to go ahead and just allow you to become to adjust your status, so you can apply for lawful permanent residency just based on the number of years that you've been here in the U.S. And so that registry idea was presented to the Senate parliamentarian. It was an informal presentation to her. The Democrats were the only ones that presented that. And she said, in a very short opinion, she said, no, this doesn't qualify as well. And so then folks started pushing for Plan C, this national campaign that we're working with. Plan C was a temporary protective type of program like DACA. And so through congressional, through passage of a bill, the adjustment of a status from undocumented to a temporary status that could be renewed once within a 10-year time span. So every 5 years you would renew, you get 5 more years, so 10 years of protection, work permit, protection from deportation. And so that went through a formal bird bath with the Senate parliamentarian, and she said, no, that cannot be included as well. And so at that point, when we heard the news, we had met in Washington, D.C. with Senator Schumer, with Senator Padilla, with a lot of folks that are really, involved in this effort to overhaul the immigration system. And it was clear to us that they were actually going to stand up and say, we're going to disregard the parliamentarians' ill advice on immigration. And so that was a huge surprise to us. The senators were willing to do that. We've been pushing for that, but when we saw that they were willing to do it, it really fundamentally changed the game a little bit. All this was moving forward. Build Back Better was still in negotiations. It's, the House version of Build Back Better includes the temporary protection program, but the Build Back Better in the Senate is where a manager's amendment would be introduced to put it back to registry. And so that registry date change would open up opportunity for about 7 million people to be able to adjust their status just simply for being here for many decades. And so, everything's, okay, we're going to finish the year. We're not going to finish Build Back Better, but that's okay because the senators are on our side and everything's moving forward. And then a senator from West Virginia appears on Fox News and says, the way that Build Back Better is written, I cannot support. There's no way for me to support it. And so that derailed the Build Back Better dream. And so in this new year, we thought, okay, they'll talk through the holidays, they'll figure some stuff out. Turns out, folks are talking blue in the face with Senator Manchin, and he's just not budging on Build Back Better. And so what happens now is the bill is going to be put on the back burner. We don't know what the temperature setting is right now, but it's definitely in the back burner. We're not sure if it's on or not. We can't tell. But we hear that this may be taken up in February or March once again. And so it could be that everything starts from scratch all over again. New things will be included, or the bill will be, broken down into a much smaller package. We're not quite sure exactly where things are going to land. What we are committed to is if we have an opportunity to put immigrants into that Build Back Better bill, then we will continue to pursue that avenue. And so now, and this week is, where we're at in terms of the state of play. We have Senator Manchin who's being courted and Senator Sinema around the John Lewis Act, and so the voting rights effort. And so that would require a change in the filibuster rules. The Senate rules as written right now, there's 60 votes are needed to even begin debate on a bill. And so if you don't have 60 votes, then that bill never sees the light of day. And so right now they're going back and forth with Manchin and Sinema to see if they can change the rules enough to be able to have a debate on the merits of a bill and then move forward with the vote. And so there's this really interesting procedural move that Senator Schumer has done. They have moved a shell bill forward that includes John Lewis Act and these voting rights components to be able to, in a bill that's already kind of moved forward in the process that doesn't require 60 votes to begin debate. And so this procedure is going to, it still needs 60 votes to be able to move forward. But if it doesn't, then that's where the Senate rule change would happen. And then you would open up debate. And then if the Senate rules are changed enough, then you can go ahead and pass the bill with a simple majority. I spend a little time on the Voting Rights Act or the John Lewis Act a little bit because it tells us what may come in the near future on other pieces of legislation. So if they're willing to change the rules on this, would they be willing to change the rules on other things? If not, then what hopes do any piece of legislation have before this upcoming election, before the big transition of power, which seems where things are headed right now. And so for us, there's still a couple more bites of the apple. If Build Back Better comes back to life, if they raise the heat on it and put it on the front burner, then we're going to continue to pursue that avenue. The other is there's another budget reconciliation vote taking place sometime in October, right before the election. And so we can make the case, okay, stick it in there, right? Make sure we have immigration somewhere, because the trouble that we're going to have, is the Senate may go through to the Republicans once again. The House of Representatives may go back to the Republicans. And then you have a president of the United States who's at 33% approval rating. So, it's getting much, much more difficult in terms of politically making this happen, the further along this goes. And so all this to say, we want to make sure that we're doing two things. One is addressing the enforcement, so the detention and deportation system. So, okay, if you're not going to pass immigration reform, at least allow families to stay, allow folks to be able to continue living their lives without being pestered by ICE. The second thing is, can we get the administration to expand temporary protective status for folks from El Salvador and in different countries who have already, are basically waiting for TPS to expire at this point in time. And so expand the time frame, cover more folks through TPS, make sure those folks are going to be taken care of. And they can renew every 2 years. TPS is like DACA, so they can renew every 2 years and then continue to have a work permit and protection from deportation. So those are the two things that we're going to be focusing on this year, as we're keeping our eye on Build Back Better and another bite at the budget reconciliation process in October. And so, I wish I had better news, right? But for some reason, we have folks that call themselves Democrats who are not playing ball with their team. And so this is where we're at right now. So I say a lot of the work that we're doing in California is really to set down a firm, solid foundation of support for the immigrant community. Should there be a Trump 2.0, should there be another, or a Trump light, right? Somebody that still follows the line, wants to beat down on the immigrant community. We need champions from California. And so we have to go back to our community and say, we know that, the Biden administration has not delivered on the promises that they made, but we have to continue to fight and protect the interests of California's immigrant community, because if we don't have those champions when the time comes, then things get really bad for the immigrant community here in California. And so, we're looking at that dual strategy of like focusing on the federal opportunities that may come, but also going back and ensuring that our communities are not going to throw up their hands and just say, why vote, right? The children of immigrants who are 18 years old and over, who are asking themselves that question, what has the party done for us? What has, what the Biden administration done for us? Those are real questions that will necessitate a good rationale that may be difficult to pitch. And so that's where we're at right now. And in terms of next steps, we're going to continue, engaging our senators and our House members. Right now, as soon as we get a Build Back Better is completely dead, or the budget reconciliation in October is not an avenue for things to move forward for immigration, then we have to start pivoting into some administrative relief, which unfortunately will be challenged in the courts. And so the Texas judge, Judge Hainan, is just waiting for some challenge to come to his desk and be able to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is not friendly to this issue. And so if there was a DACA program for the adult population of the undocumented in the US, it more than likely would be challenged, and it would be over before it got started. And so that's the concern that we have, is if we try these other avenues, they may not be long-lasting solutions. They're just going to be challenged and stripped away. And so this is where we're at right now. So I'm going to go ahead and stop and just any questions.
Jane. Wait, you're muted. Jane, you're muted.
Got it. Sorry, a couple of questions. One is, what organizations in San Diego does CHIRLA work with the most? And then the other, which is kind of related, is, are you part of the We Are Home coalition? And is that going to be an ongoing coalition? Yeah,
so CHIRLA is part of the We Are Home campaign. We're part of the steering committee. And so we're part of FIRM, the Fair Immigration Reform Movement. And so, yeah, we've been part of the national conversation around this. We've actually been pushing for a much more progressive approach than some of our national partners, quite honestly. And since the most, not the most, but the important senators, Senator Padilla, who's been championing this issue, Speaker Pelosi, have Lucille Roybal Allard, you have a bunch of champions on immigration here in California. And so we've been able to make a lot of noise in that regard. But we do work with the Alliance San Diego and USWW down there and other organizations in San Diego. We usually take their lead. They have a really great pulse in terms of border issues and our members really can't go to San Diego. So, that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in, but we do work in collaboration and coordination with some of these other groups.
Thanks.
Penny, did you have a question? You're muted.
I'm trying to, there we go. I've always been a little bit curious. Obviously, these two Democrats are just difficult. They're just not interested in working. Have we ever made an effort? There are some moderate Republicans and several who are not going to be, not up for re-election. I've always wondered a little bit, why don't we go after a few of these moderate Republicans and see if a few of them might be willing to support this? But it doesn't seem like that's happening. Just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, and a lot of these moderate Republican senators voted for the comprehensive immigration reform package and for approval back in 2013. So it was the House where the bill never went anywhere. But there are, to this day, folks that already voted for this and in favor of this. And so for us, it's always a big, surprise. Like, okay, so what happened now? Senator McConnell has a stronghold on the Republicans in the Senate. You talk about discipline and sticking to your party. They do that even when it's not in their best interest to do so. And so it's really difficult to say that they would turn around, and do that. We'll see. The Voting Rights Act maybe is something that's a few of them may be interested in, but are there 10? Probably not. And that makes it difficult.
Okay, Dana.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for all your effort there at CHIRLA and trying to push this forward. You guys are doing an amazing job, or trying to at least advocate. Let's hope for some success. And my question actually goes to what you mentioned here in California regarding our immigrant community. And I was just reading some articles about Governor Newsome's budget for this coming fiscal year. And I did notice that he mentioned having Medi-Cal, full scope Medi-Cal for all, because now we've got younger folks and we've got seniors. So my question, I have two, I guess, first question is, do you think that will be successful? Will we be able to pass that? And then are there any other aspects to Governor Newsome's budget that directly affects the immigrant community?
So I'll answer the first question. What we saw in Governor Newsome's budget, the governor's budget, was also a great surprise for 2022, because that for those folks that have been pushing for universal healthcare, this is universal healthcare, essentially saying, I know the news has made a big point of making it, it's including of undocumented immigrants, but it's actually expanding to many, many folks that don't have medical coverage at this point in time. And so this would be helping in that regard. Secondly, in terms of the immigrant population, this is something that we've been fighting for decades, to be able to, because our immigrant population is aging, and so they are also retiring. Some folks will retire without ever becoming citizens or changing their status, it looks like, and some folks will pass away before that ever happens, and we've seen that, especially through the pandemic. But in terms of what this, is it going to be easy? Probably not. Are we going to fight like heck for it? Yes, of course we're going to fight, because I think about my mom when she was undocumented and she suffered a stroke. There was, the only option is going to the emergency room. So there was no preventative care. There was no, it was very difficult for her to get by until she got better. So, and she was 43 years old when this happened. So for me, it's a very personal thing to see people suffer needlessly when they're working to the bone, to be able to, go ahead and have, a decent life for their children and themselves. It's really heartbreaking to see that happen. So for me, again, 50% of the state, right? So like if you're undocumented or you've been here for generations, this is the right thing to do. We understand that now, having gone through the pandemic, like many of our community members have passed away. And a lot of our members passed away. Our director of organizing passed away, who was undocumented. And so for us, it's very personal to ensure that folks get the care that they need to make sure folks are educated about their options. And so we're going to continue that fight for this year. In terms of what else is included, this year there is money for asylees case management that will be beginning. And so we fought for this with California Welcomes. It's a part of the We're All America campaign. We worked with resettlement agencies to be able to provide we got a bill passed through the assembly and into the Senate, but the governor beat us to it, and he said we're actually just going to include $8 million for 2 years to be able to help somewhere around 4,400 asylees and folks that are in vulnerable situations. And so that case management is the first type of program of its kind in the nation, using the resettlement model for asylees here in California. And so that's historic. We want to continue building off of that and, expand case management, obviously, because folks from Afghanistan are coming and they're very disoriented, and housing is an issue in California. So there's a lot of things that are going on. Placement for these refugees is a huge issue. And so, California is an immigrant state, and I think we just have to figure out what are some of the best practices, emulate them and copy them here. To be able to make sure that we have successful, thriving communities. In terms of what else is in the bill, I'll have to look at an analysis that our policy director sent out, but there are some other investments coming. Let me see real quick.
Yeah, as you're looking at that, I'll have to tell you the League of Women Voters of California did support that bill in regards to case management services. So I'm glad to see now that the governor's embraced that. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely. There is going to be help with workforce development. There's funding coming in for, let's see what else. CalFresh, so being able to qualify to get food. This is part of the Food for All effort as well, to make sure nobody starves. Yeah, so there's a number of things that have been included. And this is just part of the bill. It's part of the governor's budget. It still needs to pass, obviously. So, we have to convince our state legislators to do so in that.
Yeah, great. Is there any way we could get a copy of that summary, or is that something internal to your organization?
No, I can send it to Beryl.
Yeah, do you mind, Beryl? I'd like to see it. Great.
It's a press statement that we put out. So this is for everyone. So
great. Thank you so much.
No problem.
So are there other things in the state that the state could be doing? The thing that bothers me is that newly arrived people seeking asylum can't work for so long. Is there a way the state could change that?
Yeah, so in terms of a work permit, that's where the difficulty comes in, because if you're approved as an asylee, you don't have a work permit offered to you immediately. And so there's a time frame of wait where you have to wait for like a year or some ridiculous thing before you can actually begin working. So that puts a huge financial strain on the families or the folks that are helping people out. And so, in terms of workforce development, some of the things that we have worked on as CHIRLA in the past is for the like, say you want to become a hairstylist, or you are cutting grass, or you have to go through a licensing process. So there is a state bill that allows for folks to be able to do that regardless of their immigration status. And so that was a change that we had fought for. I'm not quite sure how many folks know that or have taken advantage of that, but to be able to, everything from being a lawyer or a doctor in California to, being a hairstylist or whatever the case may be, folks can be certified by the state. As long as it's a state certification, they can go ahead and do that. If they have the education, whatnot, then they can go ahead and get these types of jobs. We know that there's a lot of talent in the immigrant community, the refugee community as well, folks that are doctors or, they're teachers, or, you name it, folks that have been, have worked in different capacities in their home countries, have very limited opportunities once they get here. So, and these are all positions, whether healthcare or education, that we desperately need here in California. As we have, again, we have a wave of folks that are going to be retiring in the coming years. Who's going to take those positions, right? Who's going to be able to continue the infrastructure that we have here in California?
Okay, are there other questions? Robert, do I have to ask your question or you want to?
Yeah, just a brief question. Polo, great to meet you. Robert, part of the league, and also Director of Unified U.S. Deported Veterans out of Tijuana. Question for you. Are you guys, as CHIRLA, involved with the Immigrant Justice Network up in DC regarding the push on the New Way Forward Act?
Yeah, so anything related to immigrants is a good thing for immigrants, especially when it comes to, deported veterans. That's something that we underscore and we support. And so what we have in Mexico right now is we do have some staff. So we have folks that are helping asylees, asylum seekers get the information that they need. But we also work with Casa Migrante. We work with other folks down there on the other side of the border to be able to address some of these issues. And we actually have a movie coming out soon that we've been able to produce. It's called America's Family. And I'll send out an e-blast about it at some point. But it does cover what happens to folks who end up on the other side. And so, and we spend a lot of time making sure that the scripts follow like law. So it's not like on TV where, the teenager gets DACA immediately the day afterwards. That's not what happens in real life. This is actually based on facts. And so those are the types of things is bring to light the issues of folks that have been deported. And I think that, the veterans that have been deported, they struggle, with PTSD and a bunch of other things that are health related. And that's some of the reasons why they end up on the other side is, they have an episode and the police gets involved and all of a sudden they find themselves deported, even though they had served this country. And so, these are issues that we truly care about and we want to make sure we address. But yeah, if it's immigrant related in DC, we're there.
Great, excellent. I'm going to go ahead and try to connect with you because we are also working on the asylum seeker issue there in Tijuana through some of the different organizations that we've kind of band together. We created an alliance called the Chaparral Humanitarian Alliance that includes Dulce from Border Angels, who you probably know very well, Ian Sorello from Apollo, American Friends Services Community, Unified U.S. Deported Veterans Resource Center, and Borderline Crisis Center. At the moment, the only thing we can really do is provide Know Your Rights workshops for the asylum seekers, which we're doing twice a month through our friends at Immigrant Defenders Law Center. But through this particular alliance that we created during the period of March to August, we were able to assist slightly over 1,000 asylum seekers be able to enter through Title 42 exemption. So we're very heavily involved in that area. And I definitely want to connect with you, later on so that we can maybe discuss this a little bit further, and also the deported veteran issue. There's a lot of things there that we can definitely benefit by working together.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Likewise.
Okay. I wanted to go back to the Senate parliamentarian. Is that person a member of a political party?
Technically, the position is supposed to be nonpartisan. She did work for, I think I'm trying to remember exactly what her position was, but she has immigration background, but not on the good side. Worked to deport people. So I'll look that up. It's a little tidbit of a fact, but it sort of explains why she's basically finding avenues to say this is not the right thing to do, even though, arguing that immigrants don't have an impact on the budget, those types of conversations are very much, immigrants are just here to take things away as opposed to provide and give, right? So, yeah, so we thought, she would come to her senses around a temporary idea, but even then she was against it. And so, yeah, it's supposed to be a nonpartisan position, but she can also be disregarded. I apologize for my dogs. They get very antsy when I talk about politics. So the disregard strategy is a strategy that we have been arguing for many, many months, to say she is just there to provide guidance, but she can actually be disregarded. And so what that would entail is a vote to be able to do that. And so essentially by disregarding, it's a different formality, which would require whoever is the sitting presiding, president of the Senate at that time, whether it's Vice President Harris or Senator Schumer, they can actually say, she'll say, actually, we cannot include immigrants in, Build Back Better. And so Senator Schumer or Vice President Harris will say, thank you for your advice, but we're going to disregard that. And in disregarding, you would need a 60 vote threshold to be able to overturn the sitting president's decision. And so what that means is, 10 Democrats would have to join the Republicans in disregarding overruling.
No, you mean the other way.
So the way that works, so like 60, so the 60 vote threshold is to overrule the Senate, the sitting chair. So you would need 60 votes to do that. So if Vice President Harris says we are disregarding the parliamentarian, in order to overrule that decision, you would need 60 votes. So you would need 10 Democrats to join the Republicans to be able to do that. So it's a very procedural type of thing. And people are saying, oh, like it's going to be so hard to do this. Actually, they do it all the time. They do it, when it comes to businesses and corporations, there's no problem doing this. But what we're asking for is use this for something that is going to benefit people directly, like immigrants, to be able to get a path to citizenship. And so that's where the strategy about disregard the parliamentarian. If you formally disregard the parliamentarian, then a simple majority is all that is needed. So it's a very little minor kind of change in the approach. A Republican can make an objection to it. That's what kicks off the vote. But you would need 60 votes to overrule Vice President Harris at that point in time.
All right, so who appoints her?
Yeah, who appoints the parliamentarian and can you get rid of her?
You can get rid of her. You can fire her, actually. She can be fired, and previous Senate parliamentarians have been fired in the past when they have ruled against particular party's position or a desire to get a bill passed. And so she can be both disregarded or fired.
Would fire her? Who would fire her?
So my understanding is the Senate. So Senate leadership, the President of the United States, it's a job. So she's not elected. She's basically, just there to provide guidance based on her understanding of the Constitution.
Oh, Jane.
Yeah, one more. I wanted to ask you about the 2022 elections. Is CHIRLA very active, and its collaborators nationally around getting people out to vote, raising this issue in the election? And one thing I thought I'd mention is that a number of us here in this meeting are involved in an effort to try to get the League of Women Voters nationally to put immigration reform more front and center. So we're in touch with people in other states. And I was just wondering what CHIRLA or your group is thinking about the election.
Yeah, so we have been engaged in electoral politics back since, and the first idea came around, I think it was back in 2004. And it started with day laborers in the San Fernando Valley door knocking to get the vote out. And I think we were able to gather maybe 1,400 votes out of that effort. The reason why we began this electoral program was because at that time when the the California driver's licenses, the bill that had been passed to have undocumented immigrants be able to apply and get driver's licenses was going to be repealed, or was repealed after the governor's recall for Governor Davis. And so Governor Schwarzenegger said, I'm going to get rid of this. And he made a campaign promise on it. And so when we brought this to the attention of the Democrats in the state legislature, they said there just isn't enough votes to provide political cover. And so we're going to have to let them do that. And so when we heard that, or at least CHIRLA, our organization, heard that, then it was like, well, how do you address that, right? How do you go around that other than creating political power to be able to push back and be able to say, actually, this is what we want. So over the course of many years, we have a 501c3 electoral program. So we do get out the vote efforts. This is during the primaries, during the midterms and presidential elections. We also engage voters all throughout the year on different issues. So we do surveys, we do polling, we do that kind of stuff. And we also work in different states. And so we get funding sometimes to call into Senator Sinema's state, or, to call West Virginia sometimes, or New York, or whoever is an issue in a particular state, to be able to call voters and then patch them through to leave a message to the representatives. And so that's at the House level and at the Senate level. For this year, we also, actually, we've had a 501c4, so we do endorsements, and we also take political positions. And so that has been around since 2009. And I think we're at the tune of around 209,000 IDs that we have here in the state of California, starting from very humble beginnings of 1,400 all the way to 209,000. It's not too shabby. A lot of it is not just here in Los Angeles County, it's actually across the state of California. And so for anybody that's become what we call a new American citizen, folks that have just become citizens and registered to vote, we engage them. And then we engage them every election cycle thereafter. So we've built a lot of trust in the community. So when they hear us calling, actually people look forward to us calling to let them know about ballot initiatives, to let them know about particular candidates. They rely on us, and we become, a good trusted source to get the vote out here in California.
That's great. We've got this problem with the league in that immigration is a national issue, and so the National League has to do the advocacy. And Kim's going to talk about that a little more in a few minutes. But, that sort of ties our hands locally. We have been talking with legislators on general terms, but we can't support any bills. Any more questions? Well, Paulo, this has been very informative and fascinating to hear you. Very impressive.
Yeah, it's exciting, and thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your work.
Yeah, and thank you for all your work. I mean, we rely on folks who've been doing this for years and decades and generations to get the vote out. We believe in democracy, and we want to continue to maintain that democracy. And so, working with the League has always been a pleasure.
Do you have a newsletter or something for people who might be interested? Do you send out a newsletter? We
do send out a newsletter. If you become a CHIRLA member, you just go to the website. It's like $25 for a year. So
okay, that sounds great. Because I like the way you're doing a lot nationally, as well. Real leadership.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, it's a pleasure being here with you today. If there's any questions that you may have, and I say this all the time, I never say no to people, which is probably a problem. But if you have any question, here's my email. And just feel free to send me any requests or anything like that. There's our website as well. But yeah, I love to just engage and have conversations and just fill folks in whenever they need it. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all. Take care,
you.
folks. Have a good day.
Have a nice day. Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.